Let's break down some of the astrology for the week of April 15th through the 21st because we've got a lot going on. And then at the end of the video, I'm also going to suggest a little bit of folk magic ideas on what you can do to really take advantage of the energy that we're in and the time of year that we're working with. So the first thing I want to bring up is that we do have this big event that a lot of people are talking about now that eclipse season is over, and that is the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. This is a conjunction between the planets Jupiter and Uranus. This time it's going to take place in the sign of Taurus, and we are going to analyze the degrees that it takes place in. Basically, if you have any placement in a fixed sign between the degree of 20 and like 23 or so, this is something that you may notice a little bit more in your life and in your experience. But in general, we are noticing this more on a social scale because Jupiter and Uranus are both planets that are way out there beyond the asteroid belt. They are called outer planets. Saturn and Jupiter are called social planets because at the rate that they move, their significations tend to happen and unfold over a slower period of time that we tend to notice on a social scale. Uranus and Neptune and Pluto are called transpersonal planets because they move so slowly that we actually notice them in sort of micro-generational scales. For example, Uranus is currently in Taurus and has been since 2017, 2018, will continue to be until 2026. That's how long Uranus takes to go through a single sign. Pluto actually does designate the boundaries of our generations of humanity. And Pluto has just moved in, of course, to Aquarius after spending a long time in Capricorn since 2008. So again, we get an idea of if these planets are moving so slowly, it takes a while for what they're bringing to show up. It unfolds over a longer period of time. Thus, when we have Jupiter conjoining with Uranus, which is something that happens every 13 to 14 years, we have this cycle of social change and social revolution and social innovation that can happen, particularly in the themes of the sign that it's taking place in, which is Taurus. So we're looking at things like natural resource, like financial resource, like the systems that we use to support our livelihoods, all of these things which Uranus has already been revolutionizing slowly but surely since Uranus came in again in that 2017, 2018 timeframe. And Jupiter has really been adding to that in the last year as Jupiter has also been in Taurus. Now they are coming together to perfect this combination, this conjunction that they've been working towards over the last year. So this is when we may notice some headlines saying, hey, this thing that's been maybe subtle, but has been getting louder and louder and louder surrounding the environment, surrounding financials, surrounding, again, I would even say healthcare and education systems or supply chains, those kinds of things which help us build the society that we rely upon. Those things are looking for an overhaul, things that we likely have already heard about before, but will now have a major event pushing this forward and setting the tone for the next 14 years of focus and innovation in those areas. So how do I know this and why do I believe this? As we always do in the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom on Patreon, I go deep into citing sources. So this week, I actually looked into the book, The Gods of Change by Howard Susportis. And that book, The Gods of Change, goes into the cycles of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the ones who change things on the grander scale. And so one of the quotes that I share in the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom newsletters for the student study tier has a lot to say about the transits of Uranus. So one thing that Howard Susportis says is, quote, whether or not we believe in the concept of a universal mind or a group mind, there is no doubt that Uranus transits often stimulate greater political consciousness. Certain individuals under important transits with Uranus envisage themselves new systems or concepts which they believe will alter or improve the existing order of things, or they find causes and ideals to promote which challenge rigid or obsolete structures of society. In this way, Uranus instigates not just personal or internal growth and change, but also the evolution on a social scale. So that is something that I bring into it. There are many more quotes from Howard and how to sort of break that down on the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom.com Patreon. And you can check it out in there if you are a part of the student study tier. Otherwise, you do get a brief synopsis every week, even on the free tier. But now I want to move into another thing that's happening this week that could make this feel even more personal at the time. So I'm going to show you the chart of the exact moment of this conjunction. We're going to pull up Luna. Here we go. So for Washington, D.C., just to represent the area of the country that sort of represents the country, I pulled this chart for the moment that this conjunction occurs. So what we see is if you are on the East Coast and you look to the western horizon after sunset, and here's the really cool thing. So the sun will have set maybe an hour before this, 2 hours before this. It's 9:06 p.m. in Washington, D.C. So sunset's usually around 7:30, 7:45-ish right now. So after the sun has already set below the horizon, that's what the DC is, we will see that there is still a pretty bright star above the horizon, but just above. You can see they're very close. So if you have a good view of the horizon, a clear view, you might see a bright star there. You will not see a second bright star because Uranus is not currently visible to the naked eye. If you pull out your telescope, you might be able to see both Uranus and Jupiter. They will be conjunct at the 21st degree and 49 minutes of Taurus, which is why I brought up before, if you have something from like the 20th degree through maybe the 23rd, this might be where you're noticing, wow, there is so much change happening in my life. And you want to look at, of course, what house is it happening in? What are the significations of that house in your life? If, like in this case, it's happening in the 7th house, it may be something happening with your partner. And so you're noticing something, a change happening in their life that is also something you are witnessing and could be impacting your life as well because you two are so tied together. So the reason I'm talking about the moon being a big deal with this is because by sign, the moon is in trine to this. And throughout the day, as this is continuing to perfect, because they'll be on the 21st degree with each other for a few days or for at least several hours. If we pop back a full day, you can see they're still on the 21st degree. And at this point, the moon is applying to trine them. So between the 19th and the 20th, especially with the 19th also having this Mars sextile with the two of those. So you can see we have this aspect going on. Mars separating from Saturn, forming a sextile with Uranus and Jupiter, bringing some action into an already pretty active aspect, and then the moon bringing that down to Earth, the moon translating all of that messaging to us by opposition with Mars and by that trine that she will have with Uranus and Jupiter. So the 19th and the 20th are pretty active days this week. This is where I would be watching the headlines and just be paying attention for anything that seems to be awakening in your life. I want to emphasize that yes, Jupiter is a benefic, in fact, the greater benefic. So this actually could be surprises that are good. This actually could be really positive things. In my own life, as I am tracking this transit, it looks like this is supposed to, or this is intending to bring something that could be very positive into the life of mine and my partner's lives for the way that it's impacting our charts. So it is something that might bring change. Change can sometimes be uncomfortable, but keep in mind that it is probably leading to something that is more abundant and supportive in those areas of life that are supported, especially by Taurus and Taurian themes of having the resources you need to support, especially the area of life that Taurus rules in your chart. So while the world may have a reaction to this where we're saying, there's a lot going on here, there's a lot of change happening, again, especially on a transpersonal scale, change is uncomfortable. It takes a lot of work and time to do that. Fortunately, we have 14 years. So it's going to be okay. And it's going to look very new and very important on the day that we see it come up. And just know that we have time to work with it. And so that's my biggest piece of advice, as you may be running into some people who are like, this is scary. It's big. It's very large as far as events go, but it is not the worst thing we've seen in our lifetimes in the past 10 or 20 years even. And it is something that we can navigate and that we will adapt to as we go. And hopefully, again, with Jupiter having the influence there, we do see some positive things. Lots of art and cultural movements have happened in this time. Yes, there are political things that happen as well. And there's a lot of things going on politically in the world right now that could receive the oomph of this energy. And that's something that we have to be prepared to accept as well. It's the world doing what the world does. But in your personal life where you have the most control, look for where things are activating and where they are awakening and where you can start taking your life by the excitement that is coming into it and following that. So the next thing I want to talk about is actually the full moon that is coming up a couple days after this. So what I'm going to do is on Luna, I can go into cycles and I can pop down here to the nearest new moon, which was that eclipse. But when I go to the full moon, this little barbell here actually represents the opposition of the sun and the moon. So on April 23rd, I can come over here and it will pull up the full moon for us. So this is a full moon that you can see if you're in Virginia, where I am. It's happening right on the ascendant. So the full moon will be rising just as the sun is setting. A little bit after the sun sets, the moon will be on the ascendant at that same degree, which is pretty cool. It doesn't mean anything worse. It just means that you're going to want to look to the eastern horizon to see the full moon if you want to see it as it's perfecting. And we can see here that the sun and the moon are opposite at 4 degrees and 17 minutes, the moon being in Scorpio. What do we know about the moon in Scorpio? That is the moon in her fall. And so when the moon is in her fall, it simply means that while she is full of light, she doesn't have the resources she typically has. So this is a time where instead of feeling abundant and full of energy and having the comforts that the moon would love to offer and nurture with that she would normally have in Taurus, we have a full moon that is kind of relaxed and chill and saying, you know what, I have energy, but maybe I should put my focused energy into resting, into allowing the muscles to relax, or into allowing whatever it is that my focus is to have its potential energy, the ability to build up. So one of my recommendations for this full moon in Scorpio, which is actually my lunar return because my birthday is coming up, one of my recommendations for this is that we just take time to consciously rest, focus on recovery and rest. We have been through so much, and we're not even done yet with April. Later this week, under the influence of Uranus and Jupiter still being at, Uranus is going to catch up to that 22nd degree. You can see he's at 59 here. So they're going to be riding together on the same degree for several days, including the 25th when Mercury finally goes direct. So here we have the full moon saying, yeah, there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of energy happening. Maybe this is the best time to take a feather from Saturn's cap and just rest. Because what we have even coming up next week is, of course, Mercury finally going direct, which I can show you here. If I go into my little event navigator, do direction changes on the 25th, ta-da, we have Mercury now moving direct at the 15 degree. And these two still hanging out together, the sun now in Taurus and the moon still in Scorpio because it's only been a couple days. The moon takes about 2.5 to 3 days to leave a sign. So we caught the full moon at the very beginning of Scorpio, and now she's getting ready to go into Sagittarius, but knowing that this is still considered a full moon. She is still in her full phase. So keeping all of this in mind for the week, again, take your time, rest. Mercury is literally coming to a halt. Feel free to do the same. Don't try to rush anything because you might find that by rushing something, you make more mistakes. And that's not as much fun as when you can take things one step at a time at whatever pace you need to take them and make sure that you get everything done that you would like to do. So now one thing I want to talk about is what kind of magic can we do under this chaos? If you are someone who is doing intentional work, what magic can we do leading up to all of this energy of the full moon and being prepared for the Mercury retrograde that is coming? What we can do is we can focus on things that rejuvenate us. So again, with this idea of conscious rest leading up to this full moon in Scorpio that we're going to experience, it's very helpful to do some conscious rest. This is a great time to study what herbs you have available to you and start making your tinctures, your ointments, your plasters. In the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom, I have a recipe for a very good plaster that I pull from Homan's Long Lost Friend, which is a little grimoire that's used in Braucherei, which is the Pennsylvania Dutch folk magic that I grew up practicing. And so if you want to check that out, you can check it out in the student study tier of the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom. But basically, it's just taking the ingredients that are going to help you. I had a conversation this week on the Alchemist Inkwell podcast with Raquel Cohen, talking about her new book, where she said, see what's already plentiful. What is growing the most in your herb garden? What is absolutely taking off? Because that might be part of Earth's conversation, saying, hey, you could use more of this. So take note of what's growing in your garden. Take note of if it's something that can be consumed or used, what its properties are, what it helps with, and then see, how can I use this? Can I make it into a tincture, a tea, or a plaster if you ground it up and you can turn it into a salve for something? So think about those kinds of things. Or this is a great time under this moon, which is called the full pink moon, to begin planting some things if you don't already have them. And do try to stay native and indigenous with what you plant so that you are creating things that are built to thrive where they are planted, just like you should be. So I hope that this week becomes abundant for you, that you feel great, and that you take all of this energy and make some magic with it. You can find me, of course, on TikTok and Instagram at The Real Crystalline. You can find me right here on YouTube and in the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom Patreon, where we are doing magic all the time. And it is wonderful. And so are you. Have a great time.